Two cases, two different countries. But the scenarios are chillingly similar. Join Crime Documentary Files as we explore these two cases today. Early in the morning of July 2nd, 2016, two men were fishing on the Swan River in Perth, just like any other day. While waiting for a bite, they noticed something unusual floating on the water near the Fremantle traffic bridge, a blue suitcase drifting lazily along. The suitcase looked relatively new, bulging as if packed full of something. Curious about this strange object, the two men rowed closer and pulled it out of the water. When they lifted it, they were immediately struck by how heavy it was, far heavier than its size would suggest. They couldn't help but wonder if it contained something valuable. After dragging the suitcase onto the riverbank, their curiosity got the better of them, and they quickly opened it. What they found inside made them freeze in horror. It wasn't money or valuables, it was the body of a woman, crammed inside. The upper half of the body was dressed in 3 layers, a long-sleeved army green t-shirt covered by a black short-sleeved t-shirt printed with a Tokyo Disneyland logo, and finally a black vest on top. But the lower half of the body was completely unclothed. The two fishermen immediately called the police. When officers arrived and examined the scene, they found no identification documents or personal items that could help identify the victim. The only thing found alongside the body was a handful of broken ceramic tiles, apparently placed inside to weigh down the suitcase. With no leads to identify the victim, police sent the body for an autopsy. The report revealed that the victim was an Asian woman, approximately 5 feet 3 inches tall, weighing about 130 pounds, estimated to be between 35 and 45 years old. During her lifetime, she had received cosmetic eyebrow tattooing and undergone root canal dental surgery. Her body showed numerous injuries. Her head and face had been savagely beaten, with her face struck 25 times by a blunt object with significant force, resulting in severe skull fractures. Time of death was determined to be approximately 72 hours before the body was discovered. Due to prolonged submersion in river water, the victim's face had decomposed and distorted beyond recognition. Left with no other options, police enlisted experts to create a composite sketch based on bone structure and other identifiable features, which was then widely distributed through the media in hopes that someone might recognize the victim. During continued search efforts in the surrounding area, police recovered additional items from the Swan River. A pair of men's reading glasses, more ceramic tile fragments similar to those found in the suitcase, and a children's scooter, strangely, with a cutting board tied to it. Police compared the victim's DNA against the entire immigration database and missing persons list nationwide, but found no matches. They also received no useful leads from the public after releasing the composite sketch. Investigators began to suspect that perhaps the initial sketch was inaccurate and didn't reflect the victim's true appearance in life. They decided to adjust it, expanding the estimated age range to 30 to 50 years old and changing the hair color to brownish blonde. Despite these changes, still no one came forward with any information related to the victim's identity. 2 months passed in silence. Then on September 1st, 2016, the Perth Police Department received an unexpected call. On the other end was a young woman, 25 years old, her voice filled with worry and panic. She reported that her mother had mysteriously disappeared, and she hadn't been able to contact her for an extended period. According to the young woman, 2 months earlier she had flown from Melbourne to Perth to visit her mother. The last time she saw her mother was when the woman walked out of the house and got into a white car waiting outside. Inside the car was an Asian-looking man who drove her mother away. After that visit, the young woman had returned to Melbourne to attend her university graduation ceremony. Throughout her time in Melbourne, she repeatedly sent text messages to her mother, but never received a single reply. After 2 months of complete radio silence, her worry became unbearable. She finally booked a flight back to Perth to check on her mother in person, but when she arrived, she found no trace of her mother. Everything appeared to have been abandoned for some time. With no other choice, she went to the police station to report her mother missing. Upon receiving the report, police immediately followed up on the leads provided. They quickly went to examine the home of the allegedly missing person. It was an impressive two-story mansion located in the upscale Mosman Park area, one of Perth's most prestigious neighborhoods. The property spanned approximately 4,640 square feet, with an estimated current market value exceeding $850,000. According to property registration records, the owner was a Chinese-Australian woman named Chen Paiwen, 57 years old. She had immigrated to Australia from Singapore around 2000, had been living in Perth for 15 years, and was a legal Australian citizen with full residency rights. Through meticulous evidence collection and DNA comparison, police finally identified the victim in the mysterious suitcase. The unfortunate woman was indeed Chen Paiwen, owner of the luxurious two-story mansion in Mosman Park. After confirming the victim's identity, police conducted a thorough search of the entire mansion looking for traces and clues related to the case. However, the results surprised the investigators. Inside the house, they found no signs of any struggle or fight, not a single drop of blood anywhere. Everything in the house was neatly arranged, as if the owner had just stepped out and would return any moment. Chen Paiwen's car was still parked neatly in front of the house, indicating she hadn't driven herself anywhere. The person who filed the report was Paiwen's daughter, Wan Yiting, 25 years old at the time, having just completed her master's degree at the University of Melbourne. According to Yiting, the last time she saw her mother was on June 30th, 2016. That day, she had flown from Melbourne to Perth to visit her mother, and her biological father was also present. The three of them discussed some matters related to her upcoming graduation ceremony, after which her mother grabbed a suitcase, walked out of the house, and got into a car driven by an Asian man before disappearing. Her mother had even sent her a text message afterward, saying she wouldn't be attending her daughter's graduation because she had decided to travel around Australia with friends, and after that trip, she planned to fly to Switzerland for medical treatment. To verify this account, police contacted Yiting's father, Wan Anping, for additional information. His statement was completely consistent with what his daughter had said. Anping claimed he arrived in Perth on June 30th, spoke with his ex-wife for about an hour, then watched her leave the house with a suitcase and go off with someone. In the following days, he stayed in Perth with his daughter, even took her to driving lessons, and didn't leave Perth until July 2nd. The statements from father and daughter seemed to match up with no obvious red flags. However, there was one thing that puzzled investigators. Clearly, the daughter's master's graduation ceremony was an important event happening very soon. Why would a mother like Paiwen heartlessly skip such a momentous day in her child's life, choosing instead to travel with friends rather than attend her own daughter's graduation? Police continued digging deeper according to Yiting's statement, pulling and reviewing all surveillance footage of vehicles near Paiwen's home on June 30th. But the results surprised them. There was absolutely no footage of an Asian man driving a white car in that area at the time mentioned. This raised a big question. Was Yiting lying to the police? Shortly after, through further investigation into the victim's assets and relationships, police discovered that Paiwen had previously owned another property in the Wellington area. This house had changed hands multiple times over the years. Investigators believed this former property might contain important clues related to the case, so after obtaining permission from the current owner, they conducted a thorough search inside. What they found was completely unexpected. When examining the bathroom, investigators discovered that the ceramic tiles on the walls were an exact match to the broken tile fragments found in the suitcase containing the body and scattered in the Swan River. This finding indicated that the killer had free access to this house, meaning the perpetrator was most likely someone close to Paiwen. On September 17, 2016, an employee from Crown Perth Casino voluntarily contacted police with information. This person revealed that Paiwen was a longtime regular at the casino, and she always gambled generously without holding back. Some nights she'd walk away with her pockets full of winnings, but it wasn't uncommon for her to lose $20,000 or $30,000 and remain perfectly calm about it. This information led police to a new theory. Could the killer have murdered her for money? To test this hypothesis, they quickly examined all of Paiwen's bank accounts and her list of valuable assets. However, the results showed no unusual withdrawals, and no valuable assets had been stolen or transferred. It appeared the killer's motive wasn't financial. According to forensic analysis, the victim's time of death was determined to be around June 30th, precisely the first day that ex-husband Wan An-ping flew in from Singapore to Perth. According to Yiting's own statement, the victim had met with her ex-husband that day. This meant that on that fateful day, only 2 people could be confirmed to have had direct contact with the victim, ex-husband An-ping and daughter Yiting. Meanwhile, the mysterious Asian man driving a white car that Yiting described simply didn't exist. There was no evidence whatsoever of this person. This only deepened police suspicions about the statements from the victim's ex-husband and daughter. Police also quickly pulled all surveillance footage from cameras along the route between Pai Wen's home and the location where the body was found. Analysis revealed something crucial. On the evening of June 30th, Pai Wen's ex-husband Wan An-ping had driven to the Swan River area and didn't return home until early the next morning. Following this lead, police quickly tracked down the rental car that An-ping had rented on June 30th. During a thorough examination of the vehicle's interior, forensic experts discovered traces of Pai Wen's DNA. This evidence essentially confirmed that An-ping had used this rental car to transport and dispose of his ex-wife's body in the Swan River. Armed with the evidence they had gathered, on September 28, 2016, Perth's Major Crime Squad arrested 65-year-old Wan An-ping along with his daughter Wan Yiting. Both were formally charged with murder. However, during the interrogations and subsequent court proceedings, the case took some unexpected turns that no one saw coming. Initially, when arrested and brought in for questioning, both father and daughter stubbornly stuck to their original story, insisting that Pai Wen had voluntarily gotten into a car and left with some mysterious Asian man. But as police presented one piece of damning evidence after another, the pair gradually realized that further concealment was pointless. They could no longer hide the truth. At this point, Father Wan An-ping began telling a completely different story from what he had said before. He claimed the real reason he came to Perth wasn't to visit his daughter as he had stated, but because he received a frantic call for help from her. On June 30th, when he rushed to Perth from Singapore, his ex-wife was already dead. An-ping explained that for many years, his ex-wife had forbidden their daughter from contacting or meeting with him. Despite this prohibition, father and daughter had secretly maintained contact by phone without the mother knowing. According to An-ping, his daughter had called him in a panicked state, saying her mother had just discovered their secret communication and had flown into a rage, leading to a fierce argument between mother and daughter. During the heated exchange, they threw things at each other, and in her anger, the daughter grabbed a metal paperweight and threw it at her mother, accidentally hitting her in the head. After being injured, the ex-wife went to the bedroom to rest. The next day, when the daughter went to check on her mother, she discovered she was dead. When he arrived at the scene, An-ping claimed he found that his daughter had already stuffed the ex-wife's body into a garbage bin near the laundry room. To protect his daughter, he moved the body from the garbage bin into a suitcase, added some tiles to weigh it down, drove to the Fremantle traffic bridge, and used a children's scooter to push the body into the river. While disposing of the body, he accidentally dropped his reading glasses into the water. An-ping emphasized that everything he did was to protect his daughter. However, when Yiting heard her father's full statement, she appeared completely shocked and couldn't believe what he had said. Afterward, in the interrogation room, she told police an entirely different version of events. According to Yiting, her father came to Perth to help her and her mother discuss arrangements for the upcoming graduation ceremony. This master's graduation was an important event for her, and she hoped her father's entire family could attend to share in her joy, including her 2 half-sisters from his previous marriage. But shortly after her parents met, they started arguing heatedly over money issues. Her father told her to go downstairs to the living room and watch TV while he went upstairs to talk privately with her mother. But just a short while later, she began hearing increasingly intense and agitated arguing coming from the room upstairs. Then the sounds of arguing gradually transformed into heavy, labored breathing, as if someone was struggling. Then came a thudding sound, like something heavy hitting the floor. Yiting felt something was wrong and started to run upstairs to see what was happening. But right then, her father suddenly emerged from the room, blocked her at the stairs, and said, "Your mother isn't feeling well. Go to the nearby pharmacy and buy some medicine for her." When Yiting returned from buying the medicine, she found her father sitting downstairs, his face buried in his hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Her father tearfully explained that after she left, the two of them had gotten into an even more violent argument. In her anger, Piwin had grabbed a metal paperweight from the desk to attack him. He reflexively swung his arm to block it, and the sharp edge of the paperweight struck Piwin in the head. The impact was so severe that Piwin collapsed and died instantly. After hearing her father's account, Yiting also fell into a state of extreme panic, not knowing how to handle the situation. She had just lost her mother in an instant, and her only thought was that she couldn't lose her father too. That's why she decided to help her father dispose of the body and conceal the truth about her mother's death. She cleaned up all the footprints in the house, washed her father's clothes, and changed the bedsheets in her mother's bedroom. For 2 months after the incident, she continued sending text messages to her mother's phone to cover up the crime her father had committed. After her mother's death, she even sent money to her father twice, totaling $135,000. Yiting said that ever since she was young, her father had always been someone she looked up to. She had almost instinctively chosen to help him hide the truth. Faced with two versions of the truth, who should the police and judge believe? The common thread in both statements was that Piwin's death was portrayed as an unfortunate accident. In the heat of an argument, she was accidentally struck in the head by a paperweight, leading to an unintended death. But the detailed autopsy results told a different story. Piwin's head had been savagely beaten multiple times in succession with great force, not just a single accidental impact as both father and daughter had claimed. The wounds on the victim's head showed none of the characteristics of a sudden accident. Instead, they clearly bore the marks of an intentional, brutal killing. From a physical standpoint, Yiting was just a young woman with a small, slender frame. She simply didn't have the physical strength to inflict fatal injuries of that severity on Piwin. Only Anping, with his larger build and the strength of an adult man, was capable of such violence. Furthermore, during their investigation into Anping's background and history, police discovered that during his previous marriage to Piwin, he had a history of domestic violence against her. This was one of the main reasons Piwin decided to divorce him and immigrate to Australia with their daughter, to escape her abusive husband. Based on all this evidence and analysis, the jury concluded that daughter Yiting's account was far more credible than the excuses father Anping was trying to make. So why did Anping kill Piwin? Wan Anping was born in 1951, originally a Singaporean of Chinese descent, who had since become an Australian citizen. Early in his career, he worked as a bank employee in Singapore. However, in 1978, he was caught embezzling $250,000 from the bank where he worked. He was brought to trial and sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. After serving his time, Anping shifted to business and became a wealthy merchant. In 1985, at age 34, Anping met Piwin, a woman 8 years his junior. Piwin was born in Taiwan to a prestigious family of means, growing up with wealth and status. Because of her privileged upbringing, she chose to pursue opportunities abroad as an adult. Anping and Piwin fell in love at first sight. After dating for a while, they registered their marriage. Piwin became Anping's second wife. When entering this new marriage, Anping brought along 2 daughters from his first marriage. The family of 4 lived quite harmoniously in those early years. In 1991, Piwin gave birth to daughter Yiting, the first and only child the couple had together. Around the same time, Anping's business ventures grew increasingly successful, requiring him to dedicate more time to work while his visits home became fewer and fewer. At first, Piwin tried to understand and sympathize with her husband's busy schedule, but over time, Anping's frequent absences began creating cracks in their marriage. It was then that Anping revealed his darker side, beginning to physically abuse Piwin. The domestic violence left Piwin feeling suffocated and trapped. Fearing she would have to live under this violence long term, she filed for divorce. Finally, when Yiting was 9 years old, the couple divorced. Anping gave Piwin $15 million in assets. Paiwen took this money and immigrated to Australia with her daughter. Perhaps because her ex-husband had left such psychological scars, Paiwen never remarried in all those years. She lived alone year-round, devoted herself to artistic pursuits, and was very protective of her privacy. To the neighbors around her, she was practically invisible. Paiwen thought that regardless of everything, Anping was still her daughter's father, so she occasionally allowed her daughter to call and speak with him. But during a conversation 2 years prior, Anping inadvertently revealed his resentment and contempt toward Paiwen, which infuriated her. From then on, Paiwen told her daughter she was forbidden from having any contact with the Wan family. Yiting outwardly agreed with her mother, but secretly continued communicating with her father. Not long before the murder, Anping encountered serious difficulties in his business ventures and desperately needed money. He approached his ex-wife Paiwen hoping to borrow a sum, but she flatly refused. This rejection caused Anping to harbor deep resentment toward the ex-wife who was living comfortably with her substantial fortune. On June 30th, 2016, using his daughter's upcoming graduation as an excuse, Anping flew from Singapore to Perth to meet with his ex-wife. When they met, Anping once again brought up the matter of borrowing money, leading to a fierce argument between them. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, Anping grabbed the metal paperweight and beat his ex-wife to death. The true motive behind this brutal act was so that daughter Yiting could inherit her mother's enormous estate. Since Yiting had always been loyal to her father and sided with him, Anping could indirectly benefit from his ex-wife's fortune through their daughter. After cleaning up the crime scene and disposing of the body together, father and daughter Anping and Yiting separately returned to Singapore and Melbourne as if nothing had happened. In August of that year, Anping even casually brought his 2 daughters from his first marriage to Australia to attend Yiting's graduation ceremony. In the photos taken at the event, the whole family looked happy and joyful together. Their faces showed not a trace of grief or remorse about the woman who had been brutally murdered just weeks before. On August 31st, 2018, more than 2 years after the crime occurred, the Supreme Court of Western Australia handed down its final verdict. Wan Anping was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 20 years before becoming eligible for parole. Wan Yiting, as an accessory who participated in disposing of the body and concealing the crime, was sentenced to 4 years and 10 months in prison. Due to good behavior during her incarceration and having no prior criminal record, Yiting was granted early conditional release on November 7, 2019. In a cruel twist of irony, Paiwen had never drafted a will during her lifetime. Therefore, according to inheritance law, after her release from prison, Yiting, as the sole daughter and legal heir, automatically inherited her mother's entire fortune, worth millions of dollars. The very mother whose death she had helped conceal. On November 29, 2025, the air in Düsseldorf, Germany was bitterly cold. Around 11 a.m. that morning, a normally peaceful and quiet neighborhood was suddenly shattered by an emergency call to police. On the other end of the line, a man was screaming for help, his panicked voice explaining that his wife was in serious trouble and needed immediate medical attention. An ambulance was dispatched and quickly arrived at the scene. The paramedics rushed up the stairs with their equipment, assuming this was a routine emergency call, perhaps someone having a heart attack or collapsing who needed first aid. But the moment the apartment door opened, what they saw stopped everyone in their tracks. The man who opened the door presented a horrifying sight that made everyone shudder. His entire body was drenched in blood. His shirt was completely soaked through, the thick liquid still slowly dripping onto the floor. On his abdomen was an open wound that continued to bleed. Most terrifying of all were the man's eyes, empty and lifeless, devoid of any spark or emotion, and in his hand, he still clutched a folding knife. Witnessing such a dangerous and abnormal situation, the emergency medical team instinctively backed away from the room to make way for police. Just minutes later, German police arrived and quickly moved in to subdue the blood-soaked man. When they passed through the living room and entered the bedroom inside, the scene before their eyes was a true nightmare. Inside the room were two bodies. The first was a young woman with Asian features, lying motionless on the floor with multiple stab wounds across her body, particularly concentrated heavily on her back. Right beside her, an infant girl who had been born just 2 months earlier had also long since gone cold. The perpetrator of this horrific tragedy was named Eric. In a cruel twist of irony, just weeks earlier, this same man had been eagerly posting photos of his baby daughter on social media, writing sweet fatherly captions like, "You are daddy's little angel." When police examined the crime scene, they found an axe in a corner of the home believed to be one of the murder weapons, while psychiatric medications were scattered all over the floor. This man was a highly educated postdoctoral researcher, yet in less than 10 minutes he had heartlessly transformed what had been a happy family home into a living hell. After investigating and confirming the victims' identities, authorities confirmed that the deceased was Zhu Ruimin, a Chinese doctoral student in the final stages of completing her studies in Germany. She had been someone with a bright future ahead of her, yet now met a tragic end while still so young. And the person who brutally murdered both mother and daughter with his own hands was none other than her foreign husband. Zhu Ruimin was born in 1994, making her just 31 years old, a Chinese citizen. She was born and raised in a poor rural village in Hezi, Shandong province. From a young age, Ruimin showed herself to be an extremely hardworking and eager learner. She wasn't the type with innate genius or exceptional natural talent, but she possessed a rare quality of diligence and perseverance. Her teachers in middle school and high school all praised her highly, often saying Ruimin was the type of student who knew she wasn't as quick as others, so she always put in double or triple the effort, persisting tenaciously until she achieved her goals. Years later, the neighbors from those days still clearly remembered young Ruimin. Unlike the other kids her age who spent their days running around playing throughout the village, she was always clutching a book, sitting and reading on the front porch. That's why everyone in the village knew from very early on that this girl would definitely succeed when she grew up. After the college entrance exams, Ruimin was admitted to Shandong Agricultural University. Due to her family's financial difficulties, she had to support herself by working part-time while studying, while also striving to win scholarships to cover her tuition and living expenses. As a result, throughout her college years, she barely had to ask her family for a single penny. Despite having to work and study simultaneously, Ruimin's academic record remained impressively excellent. It was precisely because of her outstanding academic performance that upon graduation, she was honored with direct admission into the university's combined master's doctoral program without needing to take entrance exams. In 2020, Ruimin received the greatest news of her life when she successfully won a government-sponsored study abroad position from her university, being sent to the University of Düsseldorf in Germany to participate in a joint training program. This was an opportunity countless students dreamed of, the chance to study abroad and broaden one's horizons. When Ruimin dragged her heavy suitcase and set foot on European soil for the first time in her life, she could never have imagined that this very land would be where a tragic, ill-fated romance would begin, and where she would ultimately lose her life forever. The months spent studying abroad were never easy for anyone. Ruimin faced countless challenges piling up, from overcoming the language barrier, adapting to cultural differences between East and West, to the pressure of completing her doctoral dissertation within the required time frame before flying home to defend it. Despite all the hardships, the young woman never stopped dreaming and planning for a bright future ahead. Among her plans, Ruimin always harbored the dream that after succeeding, she would bring her elderly parents to live in a big city so they could enjoy a comfortable, prosperous life like other city dwellers. If she had never met Eric in Germany, Ruimin's life might have been a classic story of a female protagonist who rose from poverty through extraordinary willpower to take control of her own life and achieve success. Eric was born in 1982, making him 43 years old at the time of the incident, a Slovakian citizen. When the events occurred, he held a postdoctoral research position at the University of Düsseldorf, Germany. In terms of academic credentials, Eric had quite an impressive track record in his field, primarily researching topics related to environmental protection. The first impression Eric left on those who interacted with him was one of politeness and composure. In the eyes of colleagues and those around him, he was simply a middle-aged man with a calm, steady personality, tall and slender, wearing intellectual-looking glasses, speaking softly and gently, always greeting everyone with a warm smile. What's more, Eric had a particular fascination with Chinese culture. He had previously spent time in China as an exchange student and had even lived and studied in Shandong, Rui Min's hometown. In modern society, a Western white man like Eric, with advanced degrees, a respectable research position in academia, exuding trustworthiness and refinement, was indeed the kind of man many women would desire. But what was truly hidden inside him, whether he was really the good person his exterior suggested, those who didn't truly know him could hardly guess. After the incident, some people in academic circles came forward to analyze Eric's actual situation. They pointed out that at 43, he was still working as a postdoctoral researcher abroad with an extremely meager income. Everyone in the field understood that postdoctoral positions were essentially temporary, with no long-term stability. Looking around at peers and colleagues of the same generation, some had become prestigious professors, others had been recruited by major tech companies with sky-high salaries. Surely Eric couldn't help but feel anxiety and bitter comparisons. From the large quantity of psychiatric medications police later found in his home, one could recognize that beneath the gentle, mild-mannered mask Eric always wore in front of others, a dangerous time bomb had likely been smoldering for a long time, just waiting to explode. Unfortunately, Eric hid it too skillfully, concealed it too perfectly, causing a kind-hearted, innocent girl with little experience in romantic relationships like Ruiman to unwittingly fall in deep without ever realizing it. The thread of fate between them had actually been woven back when they were still in China. During Eric's time in China as an exchange student, he had the opportunity to meet Rui Min, though at that time they were merely casual acquaintances, nothing special. Eric had long held a favorable impression of Chinese women, believing they were both beautiful and gentle, and knew how to care for a family. He had previously dated a few Chinese girls, but those relationships all fizzled out without going anywhere. Time passed until 2020, when Rui Min arrived alone in distant Germany, and she happened to reunite with Eric as if by fate. During those early, bewildering days, Eric eagerly ran around helping her with everything, finding an apartment to rent, accompanying her to handle paperwork, showing her around to help her adjust to her new life, voluntarily playing the role of protector for the young woman alone in a foreign land. For Rui Min at that time, Eric's care and attention was the only human warmth she could grasp and cling to in that unfamiliar place. As they spent more and more time together, combined with her admiration for this foreign senior with advanced degrees and a refined appearance, the two gradually developed feelings for each other. During this period, Eric also presented himself as a mature, composed, reliable man, causing Rui Min to gradually let down all her guard and open her heart to accept his affection. Everything happened dizzyingly fast. They had only reunited at the beginning of the year, and by summer they had already flown back to China together to officially register their marriage and hold a wedding banquet. Eric even brought his parents from Slovakia all the way to China to meet the in-laws and attend the wedding ceremony. The wedding was held grandly in two locations, both in Ruiman's hometown of Shandong and in the capital, Beijing. For Ruiman's parents, this Western son-in-law was truly a source of incomparable pride. He had advanced degrees, polite and elegant manners, and spoke articulately. In their eyes, this was a perfect match of talent and beauty, like something out of a dream. Social media was flooded with sweet, happy wedding photos, with Rui Min in her pristine white wedding dress, beaming radiantly. But not long after the wedding, the first cracks began to quietly appear and spread behind what seemed like a perfect marriage. At this point, Rui Min was entering her 5th year of doctoral studies, the most stressful and pressure-filled stage of her entire academic journey. Her dissertation needed to be completed on time. She needed to search for post-graduation employment, and a mountain of tasks and worries awaited her. As for Eric, he was now a postdoc with years of experience, but his career future remained uncertain. According to regulations, postdoc salaries would gradually increase with seniority, but whether his supervising professor would renew his contract depended entirely on whether the lab could secure sufficient research funding. One could say both young spouses were trapped under mounting pressure from all sides, with no relief in sight. But right at this most stressful moment, Ruimin discovered she was pregnant. News of becoming a first-time mother was supposed to be a great joy worth celebrating, but for a female doctoral student in the final stretch before graduation, this was certainly a formidable challenge. With her resilient character, Ruimin would never accept abandoning her academic path midway. Moreover, the tight financial situation of their small household didn't allow her the luxury of setting everything aside to rest. Thus, throughout her pregnancy, Ruimin continued going to the laboratory with her growing belly. On September 20th, 2025, baby daughter Lena was born. Their little family now seemed warmer and more complete than ever. Eric seemed to transform into a different person, becoming the quintessential doting father, his social media accounts flooded with adorable photos of his little princess. On November 2nd, he even excitedly posted a video of himself tenderly lulling his daughter to sleep, accompanied by deeply affectionate captions. But behind this picture of family happiness, the young couple living in Germany faced considerable financial pressure. The government study abroad stipend had never been much to begin with, and Ruimin's extended graduation timeline due to childbirth meant she would no longer receive the allowance. The entire family's financial burden now fell solely on Eric's shoulders, with his already meager postdoc salary, causing him to bear heavier pressure than ever before. Beyond that, the young couple was also nearly exhausted and collapsing from caring for their newborn. Anyone who has experienced raising children knows that those first months after birth are practically a living hell. The baby, just over 2 months old, would wake up like clockwork every 2 to 3 hours each night, crying to be fed or have her diaper changed. Both husband and wife were scientific researchers whose minds were already worn out from work during the day. At night, they had to stay up caring for the baby, and the prolonged chronic sleep deprivation left both of them depleted both physically and mentally. On top of all these mounting pressures, the vastly different perspectives on child rearing between Eastern and Western cultures also created significant underlying conflicts in the family. Ruimin came from rural China with traditional beliefs. Her mother called repeatedly from back home, instructing her daughter that she absolutely must observe proper postpartum confinement, that adequate rest was essential for the body to recover. But Westerners like Eric advocated for modern, science-based childcare. Ruimin was caught between these opposing viewpoints, and in reality, her circumstances didn't allow her the luxury of observing postpartum confinement according to her homeland's customs. Not long after giving birth, she had to return to the laboratory to continue collecting data for her unfinished doctoral dissertation. This tension-filled life didn't last long before serious cracks began to show. The normally gentle and patient Ruimin and the outwardly calm and composed Eric began having increasingly frequent loud arguments. What exactly they argued about, the foreign neighbors couldn't clearly hear, but it was certainly the familiar conflicts of young couples with newborns, things like the baby crying in the middle of the night with no one willing to get up to soothe her, husband and wife blaming each other for who was lazier, and disagreements over trivial household spending. The situation became even worse because Eric was dealing with serious mental health issues. He had to take psychiatric medication daily to manage his condition. These medications had significant and dangerous side effects. If the user also drank some alcohol combined with physical exhaustion and feelings of frustration, their ability to control emotions and behavior would drop to zero. Ruimin was Eric's wife. She certainly noticed the abnormal changes in her husband's personality and behavior. But with her innately gentle and enduring nature, she was someone who could tolerate and suffer in silence. The fact that her husband was becoming increasingly unpredictable and frightening. She never mentioned it to her family back home, nor did she confide in friends or colleagues around her. Deep down, she still believed that with her gentleness and love, she could gradually change her husband. But tragically, she was seriously mistaken. The man she was trying to reform with love was no longer a normal person who could be reasoned with or who could understand. Then came November 29th, 2025, a fateful Friday. The sky over Dusseldorf that day was overcast and gray. Inside the young couple's small home, the atmosphere was even more suffocating and tense than the weather outside, oppressively heavy. Neighbors later recounted that on that morning, they once again heard the sounds of the couple arguing loudly from the apartment. Eric was in a state of extreme agitation and unrest at this point. After a fierce argument erupted between husband and wife, he walked over and grabbed a knife. As if that weren't enough, he rummaged through the toolbox in the house and pulled out an axe. As Eric walked toward the bedroom of their small apartment carrying those weapons step by step, Ruiman was completely trapped with no way out. She had nowhere to run or hide from the fury of her husband, who had lost all reason. Forensic experts later reconstructed what happened during those horrifying moments based on the crime scene and trace evidence. With a mother's protective instinct, Ruiman, in those life-or-death seconds, clutched her baby daughter tightly in her arms, then turned her back to face forward, using her own back as a shield to absorb the knife strikes from the killer's hand. By this point, Eric had completely lost control, with not a shred of sanity remaining in his mind. Finally, in his bloodlust, he didn't even spare his own baby daughter. Neighbors living nearby later recounted that just minutes after hearing strange sounds coming from the apartment, the baby's screaming cries suddenly went silent, and the desperate calls for help also died away. The home sank into a terrifying silence, as still as death having just visited. After the savage frenzy, Eric's rationality seemed to partially return. He didn't try to run. Perhaps he knew he couldn't escape. But then this man did something even more insane. He stabbed himself hard in the abdomen. Eric was in such pain he nearly fainted. But lying on the ground, he suddenly felt a powerful will to survive. He reached for his phone and called emergency services. "Help me! Something happened to my wife." But in the end, he still lied, claiming an intruder had attacked them. But the axe at the scene and the knife in Eric's hand made these lies utterly laughable. German police also found no traces whatsoever of any intruder at the crime scene. As for Eric's later claim that his wife had stabbed him first, police dismissed this as well, because both murder weapons at the scene bore only Eric's fingerprints. Across the ocean in distant Shandong, Ruiman's elderly parents were living in anxious anticipation, waiting for news from their daughter. For several days now, their daughter hadn't responded to any of the WeChat messages they sent, nor answered when they tried video calls. This was extremely unusual. Ever since giving birth, their daughter in Germany had sent daily messages to let her parents know she was safe and would eagerly video call so the grandparents could see their granddaughter. Everything was so abnormal that the elderly couple couldn't rest easy. Finally, 4 days after the tragedy occurred, on December 2nd, Eric's brother from Slovakia unexpectedly sent a message saying, "I can't reach Eric either." Ruiman's brother in Shandong was thrown into a state of extreme panic when he received this information. Relatives on both sides of the family simultaneously losing contact with both husband and wife. He immediately realized this was certainly no coincidence, that something terrible must have happened. Like a man possessed, he frantically searched the internet for any news related to Germany from recent days. And then that fateful headline appeared before his eyes. An infant girl and a woman dead in Düsseldorf. Male suspect with serious injuries arrested by police. The timing of the incident, the location mentioned, the people involved in the news report, every detail matched and pointed in one direction only: his own beloved family members. Ruiman's brother quickly contacted the embassy. The next day, December 3rd, the embassy sent confirmation. The Asian mother and daughter who had been killed were indeed Ruiman and her baby. When the terrible news reached their village back home, everyone mourned the young woman. Ruiman had been the pride of the entire village. Her father fell ill upon hearing the news. Her elderly mother fainted several times. The old couple, who had never traveled far in their entire lives, now had to apply for passports, obtain visas, and travel to that distant country, not to attend a graduation ceremony, but to bring their daughter's body home. In Germany, Eric was still lying in the intensive care unit. With police guards posted, he certainly couldn't escape. Because his injuries were so severe, the trial couldn't proceed yet. But the good news was that Eric had initially confessed. The judge currently signed an arrest warrant on charges of manslaughter. What's notable here is that manslaughter is not murder. Under German law, this distinction is significant. Murder can result in life imprisonment, but manslaughter or killing while experiencing a psychiatric episode or killing in the heat of passion, the sentences are much lighter. Eric might even be ordered to receive treatment at a psychiatric facility instead. This is precisely what the family and internet commentators fear most. Eric is a highly educated person, not a fool. He may have even prepared in advance for committing the crime. Will those medications scattered on the floor become his get-out-of-jail-free card? Will his self-inflicted wounds before police arrived be argued by lawyers as evidence of insanity? Police say whether murder charges will be filed still depends on the autopsy results and complete evidence from the crime scene. The axe is crucial. If it was just grabbed in the moment as a weapon, that indicates a crime of passion. But if it was prepared beforehand, that's ironclad evidence of premeditated murder. The investigation is still ongoing, and those are the two cases for today. Thank you for watching and see you in the next videos.